Welcome! I'm so glad you're here. I'm Gila Ross, parenting educator and coach, author of Living Beautifully, and host of the Confident Parent podcast, bringing you the content you need to bring more ease, joy, and love into your parenting so that you can show up as the parent you want to be to your children. I'm very honored and excited to have two guests with us, Dr. Chesner and Dr. Markowitz, who are authors of the book Host to ADHD. And I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves to us.
Hi,
Dr. Chesner, yes.
I'm Dr. Simcha Chesner, and I'm a clinical psychologist living in Israel. And in my spare time, I've been here for about 35 years. And for about 20 years, I founded and established a series of schools in Israel called the B'nai Chayil Academies that deal with young men between 7th and 12th grade who have ADHD and associated problems, challenges, who were really struggling with the regular school system.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Sarah Markowitz. I am in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I'm actually the director of an intensive outpatient for women and have also worked extensively with adult ADHD. And Dr. Chesner came to me about doing this book. My husband is a Rav in Fair Lawn, a congregation Shomrei Torah. I have the privilege of being the Rebbetzin there with my 5 daughters. And I had to take Dr. Chesner up on this because there is a tremendous need. So it was my extracurricular and now something that I am embracing, true to my ADHD. I too have ADHD. You will see that throughout this podcast. And that is a tremendous focus of what we're up to now is kosher ADHD.
Beautiful. You've both done a lot of work with the ADHD community. And what inspired you to focus on ADHD?
Well, I made Aliyah in 1991 from Cleveland, Ohio to Jerusalem. And when I got here, similar to what I had seen in the States, but there was even at that point less knowledge here, that no one knew how to deal with these children. And there were thousands of kids, literally, that were just not being treated right medically, psychologically. Parents were being blamed as if, their kid has ADHD, it's their fault. No one really knew whether it was the child's fault. No one really was able to deal with it correctly. And I was lucky enough that in the years that I was learning, when I was in graduate school at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, so I learned quite a bit from Professor Russell Barkley, who was really one of the early leaders in the ADHD movement, and many of the best books are written by Russell Barkley about ADHD. And I just felt we've got to try to do something here in Israel. So back in the early 90s, I set up the first ADHD clinic in Jerusalem. And then in 1993, I established the first school system for boys with ADHD. So that really gets me.
And Dr. Chesner often cites the research that recently has come out of Bar-Ilan University, right? About the rates in which children with ADHD end up not identifying as observant anymore. And that is a tremendous loss to the community. And there has to be something that we could do differently, that children who have ADHD, who grow up in a frum home, are growing up in a way that they end up not wanting to be religious anymore. And that is another tremendous loss, that it's something that we could, be helping.
Do you have a theory as to why that is? Why there's such a high rate of attrition from religious kids that have ADHD?
Yeah, in our book we term it as the Esav complex, and that they're two brothers. They're both genetically from the same parents, Yitzchak and Rivka, but one Yaakov, Jacob, is the Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. He's a perfect fellow. He likes to sit in tents. He must be a very good student. And then he has this brother who's basically described as a wild man. He's very, he's out there. He's very active, he's an outdoorsman. He doesn't like being inside. And we see he's a very impulsive guy. Esav is very, very impulsive. He's referred to in the Bible even as admoni. It's a Hebrew, means red, reddish, fury. He's hot-tempered. And in Israel, a person with red hair is called a gingy, and it even refers to the intent thing of people with short fuses. And so on one hand, we feel that our educational system and our cultural system, the Jewish cultural system, really has favored over these past couple thousand years at least, has favored the Jacob temperament. They favors Yaakov. It doesn't favor the Esav temperament. That the Esav who's more active and wild, not going to sit in class as well as the Jacob. And we tend to think of those Admoni kids as bad kids, which is problematic if you're a student of the Bible, because in the book of what is the book of Shmuel, right? We see that there's another Admoni, this red, fiery, disposition, and that's King David. So King David is also an Admoni, and because of this, we think we also have to take care of the Admoni type of kids, because otherwise we're losing all of the King Davids. And that's what's happening today, unfortunately, in Jewish education, in Jewish society. So many kids who are born into families that are connected to the religion on some level, they leave it because they get hit over the head so many times, told that they're not good, that they're not sitting right, they're not learning well enough, they're not quiet enough. They go to synagogue, they go to shul, and they're whatever, that they're disruptive. So all of these things, we feel that society needs to reevaluate itself.
And I want to just add to that because it's a powerful imagery. Really, part of the book is, I think, a core part before you think about anything practical, anything tangible, physical that you're going to do. We really focus on perspective and understanding what this means, what we're saying. And it sounds like crazy because when you think about Esau, you have like a gut reaction, like, oh no, he's like the bad guy. And then you think about David, and David's like, wow, David HaMelech, right? But what we're saying is that there's this biosocial theory. There's a part of the brain that people have. It's called the executive functioning. I'm not going to go into the prefrontal cortex. And executive functioning is a more sophisticated part. And there can be many executive functions. We talk about impulsivity or inattention, but it also talks about cognitive flexibility, planning, organization, the ability to follow through with details. There's so many components to this. And this is the part that is not as developed, and the way in which it works is that a person might not be like as motivated unless it's something that's very interesting. For example, that's part of executive functioning. So they have to really be in a certain environment to like succeed more. So you have, the difference is that there's a biological disposition, a brain-based disposition. Depending on the environment, a person either is going to be doing really, can succeed, or not do well. And that's the difference between the Esav and the David. And we want to empower people. David was able to channel his passion, his wisdom. He gave us Tehillim. He gave us some, right? Like we go to it, and we love that he is so emotional and connected, right? We love that. But if you take someone like David, who was a shepherd, right? You put him into like a system, and we're not understanding that he might not be able to sit straight, right? Like as Shmuel comes together, he was like the last of the last picks. In recess, the kids are the last pick, the last of the last. This is the core part of the book. And then we apply the psychological idea, this biosocial theory. There's a no blame approach. It's just, how do we understand fit? So we really need to understand the unique profile of each individual. And therefore, what environment is going to be the best fit, and how do we advocate? And then as people get older, teach each child to understand themselves and what they need. And as adults, like as myself, right? Like, how to understand to advocate for what I need and recognize I'm going to need certain scaffolding. I might need certain help, and then I'm going to soar. And without it, to expect myself to be able to do better, like I'll just feel bad about it, feel guilty. The expectation that I should just be able to, as a mother, right, being organized about all these things. Someone called me yesterday, and he was saying how He had this job and then I have this job, and he's doing amazing things for the klal and a great, resourceful human being. And I'm sure there were times when he was not feeling so great about himself. He was saying that in, a Hasidish, cheder, it was much harder for him. Now he's able to do more of his own thing, right? But each context, not on purpose, not to shut anyone down. We're just looking at the fit and seeing that when the fit automatically doesn't work, it can be harder, and that can turn people off. At the same time, there's amazing things about Judaism that when you're on fire and something's exciting to you, so for someone with an ADHD brain, that's like ping, ping, you're pumped, you're excited. And so the more you connect to something, the more you're interested in it. And so it's, in some ways, it's the answer. So there's stuff within Judaism that makes it more difficult, and there's some things that is the
Right.
answer.
You mentioned that about environments, right? And how, people with ADHD will thrive in some environments and really struggle in other environments. Tell us a little bit more about the environmental aspect of it. Like, how do we set up an environment that our kids with ADHD can thrive in?
I'm going first. We need to help our child be able to learn. Don't expect them to pick something up because you tell them, right? And so an environment that's going to be helpful is one in which we are going to first explain what it is that needs to get done. And I know from, right? And then also we do these WOMACs, right? A WOMAC is a working memory activation cue. They need like real signs. Signs can be extremely helpful to remind us how to do things. So we need an environment that is going to be set up. So if you want your child in the morning, you say, I need you to get your knapsack and pick out your snacks and come meet me by the front. And they're like, wait, what? The minute that you said the second thing, the first thing is erased, because that's working memory, right? And so you can get annoyed at your child, or you can know that that's how they're going to function. So you say, okay, now I learned this beautiful idea. Working memory means that a person can only hold so much information, and certain people with ADHD struggle with this, for most people. So I need to first explain to them what it is that they need to do, and then I need them to look at it, and I have to practice with them. It's the shift that this is what needs to happen, that this is the skills, and I have to do that. The thing is, in a school for 20 kids, for 30 kids, 40 kids, I don't know, right? In a big classroom, how are we going to help the teacher do that? Right? How are we going to help the child succeed in a classroom? So you want to understand that there's certain skills that they can learn. We have to teach and practice certain skills that, like, we call them the 5 Ps. I'm going to tap Dr. Chesner in how to do these 5 Ps. And then as anyone who's an advocate, you want them to understand you're not imposing. They could choose to not be like this. What you're saying is, oh, they work the best in this way. There are times that I've had schools and I've tried to work with the teacher and explain to them, if you don't remind this child that you're shifting to a new thing, she's just going to continue to read whatever she was doing from before. Then it's really embarrassing when you call her out. So she needs like an extra, everybody, like a cue word, right? Or someone like passes by her desk at that moment. If a teacher can't do that, if the teacher is not able to help the child remember to bring their stuff home, then just maybe we can modify our expectations, and we'll do the best we can to think of like different ideas. So I guess my point is there's like many different types of things that you can do. Working memory activation cue is one. Understanding the perspective of each child. Scaffolding, which means to teach them and totally scale back, slowly scale back. Think about rewards, even if they want to do it. I mean, some people get paid for their jobs. Like, they can't get themselves to do the things that they want to in the moment that they want to, right? So they might need an incentive to do it in order to be effective. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're not motivated. They're not intentionally trying to be annoying. They forget. They're doing whatever it is. They're very easily distracted. And so we have to remind them, this is what we're focusing on. And this is going to motivate, be an incentive to do this. Sounds like simple. Use our community to help. So let's say you're not great at certain things, but there's another home that's really good at doing certain things. So let them go over there a little bit. Then they can come to you to be the house that's so much fun and like wacko and whatever. But it could be that you can learn so many things from them, right? Or accountability. You think accountability is less important, and we're going to show you it's more important. So these are just some examples, but small tweaks make the biggest deal.
Right. So you've covered loads of different tips and tools. And I want to kind of make it practical for parents that are listening. And perhaps if we want to make it practical for parents, like you spoke about scaffolding, you spoke about working memory activation cues. Is it really about getting to know your particular child and seeing where the issues are cropping up, and then sort of trying to figure out what is it that I can do that will help them do it. Is that kind of how you would summarize it in a practical way?
Yeah, we actually call our parenting system developmentally attuned parenting, which means that the parent needs to really know his or her child. That mothers need to know their child, not as they imagine them to be, not as they wish them to be, but as they really are. And to get to see, this is my child, he is A, B, C, D. And then to be able to see that in a non-judgmental, non-critical way, to see that within any personality type, there is tremendous spiritual energy. And we want to help parents understand that they're dealing with this incredible resource of spiritual energy, like nuclear energy. It needs to be directed and handled carefully. And, it's hard to manage. We don't have any magical way that it becomes easier to manage. With whatever approach you're going to take, you need to, one, know your child cognitively, and on an emotional level, be compassionate towards your child. If you can have that compassion, which means to be mindful of your child in a non-judgmental, non-critical way, then there are a million things around us. And I think within the Jewish world, Dr. Marcus was mentioning some of them, Jewish community life, that really is great for ADHD people. But we need to do it compassionately. And I think that's what's really hard.
So, for example, at the end of the day, it could be that you have a lot of patience for your child and they might be asking you the same question over and over, and you might be attending to a different child and don't have the time. It could be that if you're not able to set them up to really manage this, or this isn't one of the things that you're really focusing on with them, then to just be annoyed with them that this is what they're doing right now, you have to be mindful, okay, how can I set them up in the future to work on this differently? How could I set it up when they get home? What do they know exactly? Are they clear of what they need to do? Can I help headed off by planning that they can go sit somewhere else, or I have something that they could be fidgeting with, or that this is just what they do, and how do I want to respond to it? We're not up to changing that, right? Because we end up, we can feel very exhausted by them,
Right.
and it really can happen. And the difference, again, we can't iterate enough. Dr. Russell Barkley says the difference between successful individuals with ADHD and those who are not is the compassion to, all those around them. And that just means forgive them and give them another chance. It doesn't mean that they don't need consequences. It doesn't mean we talk about empowered rule giving and how they need that explicitly and how Hashem gives us rules. And we want to do that. But I just want to say one thing that that I didn't highlight before. The reason why we focused in this book about adult ADHD, right, in the third part of the book, is because it is a highly genetic set of brain systems, right? And so usually one of the two parents have ADHD, if not both of them a little bit. Nothing wrong with it. It just becomes more difficult when you yourself have ADHD without working on this and knowing some of the wisdom that will help yourself. It could be very, very difficult to implement the things that people are telling you. So if you're that person who feels so defeated because every good suggestion feels impossible, also be compassionate to yourself, because I think it's so important, and get whatever support you need. You might need support even if you don't have ADHD, because there's this quality, and that's the group to be able to give each other support and help us to be most effective. But even more so if you yourself are struggling, really see what is going to be helpful for you so that you can be more emotionally ready and regulated for what is going to come at you, which will be a lot of potential emotion dysregulation.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate what you're both saying, and the emphasis on compassion, the emphasis on knowing our kids, and the emphasis on working with the kids that we have. What happens when our kids is in a school? Because we have somewhat control over our own homes, but when we're sending our kids to a school, we're working with the school, right? And oftentimes the schools don't know the kids, right? Or they don't have compassion for ADHD kids, right? You have a teacher who's anyway overwhelmed, and then you throw in a couple of ADHD kids in it. How can a parent advocate for an ADHD child in a school setting effectively?
Right. I think the first and most important thing is, once again, going back to that ability to express and project compassion is probably the biggest problem today that we see, are that parents and teachers tend to demonize each other. People think that, oh, the school is terrible, or people think these parents are terrible, they're crazy, they don't know what they're doing with their children. Parents and teachers, but not speak from the perspective of the parent. Parents need to understand, wow, it is hard when you're in a classroom of 20 or more children. It is harder to deal with a group of kids who are ADHD, with one child who is ADHD. So you have to have compassion. One of the things that I always believe in terms of, parent, what school is a good school for kids with ADHD? And I say, well, a good school is a school that has the most compassion. In other words, if you have a school and the teachers are compassionate and they don't have too many extra services, special services, I would rather have my child go to that school than to go to a school where they have loads of special services, but the staff is not compassionate. Because if these children are treated and dealt with in a compassionate, attuned, developmentally attuned manner by their teachers as well, they are great. They will come and surprise everyone with what they're able to do. The schools that I set up here in Israel, we had a much higher rate of matriculation scores, passing the matriculation examinations, than does the general population. It doesn't make sense because, right, ADHD kids are always getting in trouble, getting thrown out of school. But I believe that we began with compassion, and compassion should never be confused with permissiveness. It doesn't mean that you're very permissive, because it's really not good. I don't think it's good for any child to be overly permissive, but for an ADHD child, it is really good to have strong limits and clear expectations that can be spelled out. So when a parent can be an authority figure and know what to say yes, and know how to praise, and know what to say no, then the parent will do well, and the same applies for the teacher. The teacher has to be an authority who can set limits, but is looking at the individual child in a compassionate, realistic manner.
I think when a parent also speaks to the school, so number one is really communicating and really holding that compassion, reminding themselves we're not, especially if we feel defensive, right? We might feel like we were just attacked, they called, or like it was the third time, they're like, come pick your child up early, right? Like I'm saying, there could be a lot of things, and we are feeling offended, and it might be that they even say something that's offensive, but not on purpose. No one is intentionally doing this to, they really can see that some of the things, like one of the kids might have said something that's really mean to another kid, not intentionally, right? And so if you can hold that there's always a reason why, and that we do the same with the teacher, there's always a reason why they're overwhelmed. Okay, so now what do we do practically? We don't want to just feel hopeless. And some schools, it's not helpful if you say, my child has ADHD, a teacher may automatically like kind of like shut down, right? What we want to do is like look at that unique profile. My child does really well when they get these types of reminders, right? And you have the same language that you have for your child, for the teacher. Try and understand as much as you can about how the school operates in the beginning, whenever the teacher is available to you to do that, so that you can be an active problem solver and offer to be, and it sounds overwhelming. So you're saying, what can you do? Again, you could also say, oh, call Kosher ADHD. We'll come in and we'll do trainings and we'll support teachers. But it could be, right, like on some level in the future, we hope that we can work with educators and support them in how hard this is. If all the schools can't be changed and every setting isn't the best environment, we still, like, teachers can need support the same way that parents need support in doing this. So we want to help in active problem solving as much as possible, to give them a key both to our child and to the teacher about ways in which this child can succeed, and ways that we have to imagine that will be easy to translate into the classroom. It has to be beneficial for all the kids. Otherwise, it's not, you think about the math. 30 kids, 3 kids with ADHD, 30 kids who don't have ADHD. Why? Like, the numbers don't work out. Cut my loss, like, got to help the 30. I can't help these 3 kids. It's just not fair. But we want them to not look at it like that. So any specific suggestions that we could give them, like, anything that you want to do that could be, my kid benefits from extra review. Is there any way that we could set this up? We will help. We will buy donuts for the classroom. I don't know what you buy for classroom. Everyone's in different parts of the countries. Whatever you could do to be and they see that you're really trying. When you feel like you're a partner and you validate and you get it, and they're really out of the box ideas that they just probably don't have the time and bandwidth to think about. As long as, and you ask them for their feedback, does this even seem reasonable? If not, you could say, I totally get it, right? But know the school, know whether you see that this teacher is able to work with you or not. And then you have to kind of teach your child, like, you know what, not every year is going to be the best year. So let's minimize damage if you need to take them out a little bit early, right? Like, you got to know and work within the system and tell them, like, it doesn't mean that your whole identity is just about how you do in school. You can be great in different areas. You want to highlight certain areas, not others. And I don't know if that is specific enough, but you really, like, you have a very flexible, adaptive kind of way to help your child, right? Either you go about it with like specific recommendations, or you try and help your child be more flexible and be thoughtful about, like, what are the times of the day when that's really a problem, and how do I minimize damage? Which doesn't sound the most promising, but Dr. Chesner and I, and we ask everyone who's interested, like, reach out to us, kosheradhd@gmail.com. Kosher-adhd.com is our website. We are taking this on as a community, and we want to do it together. We're not putting it on anyone. We're saying, let's all pool our wisdom, because some people with ADHD are some of the wisest out of the box thinkers out there. And I genuinely believe we will move forward in this. If people could do better, they would. And going to slowly do this, and also try in big ways to make the ripple effect. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for this important community service that you're doing. I want to ask you, what is something practical or something listeners can do to take away some of the insights from our conversation and implement it into their interactions with the ADHD kids?
Well, I live in a city called Ma'ale Adumim. It's right outside of Jerusalem, and my daughter and her husband, they live downstairs from us. They have a little boy. He's like 2 years old. And yesterday, I went out, was having a cup of coffee, and I was watching my son-in-law and my grandson in the backyard. And it was at the end of the day. My son-in-law had worked hard. He was tired, but I saw my grandson kind of just playing with him and kind of wrapping himself around his father's neck. I mean, he was filled with such joy and such pleasure. And I was looking at that and I said, what a beautiful thing that here's another person who's tired. And I know he would rather be either whatever, resting, eating, going, take a shower. I mean, there's a lot of things he would rather be doing than playing with that toddler at the current time. But I saw the joy and exuberance and amazement and wonder in the toddler's face. And I said, wow, that is the greatest thing I think a human being can do. And so what I would say, a practical tip, is for mothers and fathers to be aware of how important your interactions with the child are. Be aware that the face that you put on, the vibes that you give forth, are either going to let that child feel like a spiritual, loved creature, or feel like just a piece of junk. And really never, never underestimate how important you are. That's what I think the most important thing for parents and teachers to know is.
Thank you.
I would add to that wondrous observation that Dr. Chesner speaks a lot about. There are a lot of moments you could look at when a child is not succeeding, but take one when they are, and that wonder that Dr. Chesner is talking about, like, really expand on that. And then when it comes to really just go there and say, like, wow, but it has to come from a deep understanding. My father taught me, IDF, right? Even though we know IDF is Baruch Hashem, the Israeli Defense Forces, intensity, duration, and frequency. When we want to understand progress, if a kid used to tantrum, but now they're tantruming less intensely, not as often, less frequently, that is a big deal, right? So sometimes when it's someone there, it's so hard for them to make changes. Notice, yes, maybe they were asking me 20 questions yesterday. Today it was only 10 questions. Whoa, that is huge. So be able to shift how we look at progress, really shift. And remember, when we say, oh yeah, my husband, he doesn't want to go to Minyan, or my kid, right? Like, just say like, wow, it is so hard for this child to get up because their brain does not have the same arousal. They go to sleep, it's harder to fall asleep, and it's harder to wake up. It's not that he doesn't want to. So then when there's something that he's able to, if he does go, it's a huge deal. I'm not making a big deal just for like, oh, so cute, make a big. It's a big deal for someone who, there's again that relentless quality, and it is so hard for them if you really understand the challenges that they have, and then they're not giving into it and they're overcoming it and they're having the sense of self-control. It's a big deal. And notice it and really appreciate that they are making those changes, and then set them up for success. Sometimes it's just like, yes, when my child says, can you help me set up my homework, and you're just like, you should do this yourself, you're in 4th grade, right? That is like a recipe for invalidation. We should really know, like, what can this child really do? Can they sit for 20 minutes in davening, or like, can they sit for 10 minutes and they love singing? Let them come inside, sing L'Chadodi. They leave and we tell them what to, and that's amazing. And then as they get a little bit older, we'll ask them to do more stuff. What can they really do? Help them know what to do and really notice that. And with the siblings, it's very hard, right? Because you're like, well, she does it this way and they don't do it this way. And I think what's better than to teach our children, they're different kids, are different like different ways, and everyone needs different things. You wouldn't always want to be like this. You would, right? Like, and be mindful to recognize that Hashem gave us, there's a koach here. And practically speaking, like I say, small things, I put my keys in a specific place, or I have 2 of everything, to the extent that I can. I know I'm going to lose things, right? Like, I take pictures of things. I set alarms. If I don't have an alarm, but I used to have alarms, but I didn't write down what the alarm told me. And I was equally as like, wait, what am I? What? And I would press snooze. Like, I would just ignore it. But you're like, what? But that changed my life. An alarm. And then it tells me exactly what I need to do. Now I can be more effective more often. I have to know when to set I set the alarm. It took a lot of time to figure out when I needed to set an alarm, when I'm going to have time to do this thing. But if not, then I'm not the most thoughtful, right? Then I might forget things, but not because I don't care. And our child are not doing it because they don't care. And so I guess, practically speaking, really just continue to hone in on this and what it is, and setting them up, and getting support to do it if it's something that is a very hard thing for you, and really being proud of, like,
Thank
the
you.
small things
Thank
that
you.
you're doing.
Thank you both so much, Dr. Chesner and Dr. Markowitz, for your time, for your expertise. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, want to learn more from you, what's the best ways for them to do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is to buy the book Kosher ADHD. Kosher ADHD is in most Jewish bookstores, both in Israel now and in America and in other places of the world where English is the spoken, there's people speak English, or it can be bought directly off of Amazon, Kosher ADHD. And we have a website that is called kosher-ADHD.com. And you can contact us by Gmail also, which is kosheradhd@gmail.com. But yeah, we love hearing from people. We are interested in coming to every school and every community, and any individual who was interested in us helping them with their children, we are here. We would love to help you, and please contact us.
Thank you so much for your
much.
time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your questions for future episodes. And please take a moment, think about someone else who might benefit from this, and forward it on to them. If you enjoyed this podcast, You'll love my book, Living Beautifully, for more insights on how to bring meaning, joy, love into your life based on timeless Jewish wisdom. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out.